This story happened about 5 years ago in a fairly small town in Illinois. I was 26 years old at the time. My husband and I were looking to rent a small house. We needed a place bigger than our one bedroom, one that would accommodate us and 2 of his cousins. They would be staying with us for an extended vacation from another country. I went to look at a set of attached houses and was joined on my tour by another older woman. She asked me what I did for work, and I told her I work with children with special needs. She said that she had a son with a disability, and if we both moved in, I could help him. I didn't think much more of it at the time. Flash forward a few weeks, and we are in the move-in process. The houses occur in groups of 4, with 2 groups on the left side of the street and 2 on the right. Total of 16 houses. The road is basically a dead end. We move into the second house with the quad on the right side, and the lady I toured with moves into the second on the left side, exactly across from us. On either side of our house is a family of children. Grandparents raising a 13-year-old granddaughter and a Brady Bunch stepfamily, raising multiple children with at least 2 to 3 teen and preteen girls. This matters later, I promise. Everybody seemed friendly and family-oriented. A few weeks after we move in, we are waiting for his cousins to arrive. I see the lady I toured with occasionally, but never see a small child with a disability. She does have what appears to be an adult son living with her, mid-20s, average height, slightly bulky. He often sits on a patio furniture in his garage with the door up. When I'm coming home or leaving, we wave and say hi, but that's about it. A lot of people in the neighborhood use their garages as patios. It's very weird. I can't explain it. One night, it's about 3 a.m. I'm in graduate school and stay up all hours of the night studying. My husband works midnights in a Toyota factory and won't be home for about 4 hours. I just laid down about 20 minutes before but was not asleep yet. It was going to suck it. 6:30 a.m., but 4 hours a night was the norm then. All of a sudden, I hear a loud knock at the door. I go to answer it. There's no peephole. But about 2 feet away is an oversized set of windows that looks into a living room. They're covered with blinds, and peeking out is clearly noticed by the person at the door. I skip this and talk through the door. I will stop here and say I am inherently naive. I trust everybody, but I'm getting somewhat better since we have moved to a city since this occurred. At the other side of the door is the neighbor's adult son. He tells me that his mother left for work and he forgot his keys, and could I let him borrow my phone to call his mom? I go to unlock the door, just to find that I know this man from the neighborhood and I wanted to help. At the last second, my brain kicks in. I tell him that I'll dial the number for him and go to get my phone. When I return, I see the handle jiggling. Why didn't I stop then? I don't know. Instead, I ask him for the number. I still don't know why I didn't open the door. I'm very naive, but also very thankful something stopped me. He rattles off a bunch of numbers. The area code wasn't right, and it wasn't enough for a telephone number. I asked him to repeat it, thinking maybe I misheard. He says, "Oh, that's okay. My mom just pulled up." Remember, his house is parallel to mine. I look out the window and nobody has arrived. The garage door isn't up, no cars in the driveway, and no lights are on. He walks over and walks directly into the home, using the front door. After taking a few deep breaths, I try to decide if I should call the cops or if maybe I'm being paranoid. Somehow, maybe I missed his mom's arrival. It's not really possible, but I didn't want to think about the alternative. However, at the moment a police car pulled up, lights on. The couple on the left side of this house is a young lesbian couple who coincidentally work with my husband. They come out to meet the police. I also go out thinking I can at least ask him to follow up once whatever he was called for was resolved. Turns out the man had tried to open their door and walk in. Because they also worked midnights but had a day off, they also kept late hours. They were watching TV, heard him and called the cops. I tell the police my story and go back to bed. I figure I'm overreacting because he didn't ask me to make a statement or otherwise record my issue. More of an I'll check this out little ladies thing. The next day, I'm talking to the grandmother of the 13-year-old and the mother with multiple kids that live on either side of me. Apparently, he watched their daughters playing outside and even asked one to come over and sit on his lap in the garage. The grandmother said he tried to open the bedroom window of the girl, but it was locked. I don't know if they reported this to the police, but they said he was asked to move by the landlord. His mother could stay, but he wasn't allowed to live there or visit. After that, things calmed down. We did notice tool marks on the back door, which opened directly in the master bedroom. I know for a fact that the marks weren't there when he moved in, as I took pictures of everything to ensure we received our deposit back. However, I didn't observe them until a few weeks later, and he was already gone. I can't say for sure if he did it prior or if it was someone else later. Either isn't a comforting choice. Many months later, near the end of our 1-year lease, I start to see the son walk around again. He wasn't consistently at the home like before, but appears to visit once a week or so. One night around 2:30 a.m., there's a loud knock on the door. This time my husband, who had switched to a daytime shift by that time, answers through the door. As soon as the person hears a male voice, they turn and walk away. They're wearing a hoodie and dark clothes, and he can't see the face. The body type is similar. The person walks at an angle away from our house in the general direction of the back of the neighbor's house. It was unclear if he was walking towards a creek or swamp area with an open field behind, or to the back of the row of houses across from us. Either way, I called the landlord the next day. He confirmed the man wasn't supposed to live there, said he had mental challenges but didn't elaborate, and said he would follow up. My mom moved to Manitoba, Canada to stay with her aunt and uncle while she worked. The company she worked at was on the top 3 floors of an office tower on co.ag Ave. It was located on the same level as the cafe, so everybody came up to their floor and just walked past its reception desk if they wanted something to eat. The receptionist would often ask my mom to cover for her while she went on her lunch break. While she was taking over one day, a handsome Middle Eastern man came up to her and struck a conversation. He was around his 40s, dressed sharply and very charming, and said he worked for a company a few floors down. He commented on how attractive she was and asked if she wanted to do any modeling for his company. He handed her his business card and left. She was not sketched out by the guy because he seemed too normal, but asked both her mom and aunt what she should do. They both told her to go for it, but to call the Better Business Bureau to see if the business was actually legitimate. According to the BBB, it was real. The next day, while my mom was working the desk, he approached her again and asked if she put any thought into the offer. He asked to meet for lunch the next day at the Fairmont Hotel so they could talk about the business. The hotel was in walking distance from the company, and you could see it through the window of their offices, so she felt safe enough to go by herself. She did tell her coworkers, and they agreed to call the police if she was not back in time. The next day, she arrives at the hotel early. She finally spots him at the check-in table. She goes up to him and realizes he's checking into a room. She is getting a bit weirded out because all he said was that he wanted to have lunch in the restaurant there. He explains to her that he has a whole briefcase full of stuff that he wanted to present to her, and that it would be more private to show her in a hotel room. After a bit of arguing between my mom and him, he finally persuades her to go to the room. The check-in staff looked a bit skeptical while he handed him the key. They get in the elevator, and that is when she realizes he does not even have a briefcase, and it wouldn't be in the room already because he had just checked in. Instead of getting the heck out of there like a normal person would, she follows him to the room. She takes the chair by the window, while he lies down on the bed with his arms crossed behind his head. He can tell she is uncomfortable, so he asks her what her dream car was and says she could afford it in a few months by modeling for him. He said all she would have to do was wear different kinds of clothing and lingerie and stand in separate partition rooms while buyers from all around the world would bid on the outfits. Or bid on her, I should say. After his spiel on the company, he asked her to take her clothes off so he can see her body because she needs to have a good figure to be able to model. Again, she is iffy, but he persuades her to get undressed in the bathroom and walk out in a towel so he can get a good look. While she is in the bathroom, she hears him talking in a different language and laughing on the phone. She walks out in her towel and he tells her to do a spin while he's still on the phone, but she gets freaked out and runs back into the bathroom to get dressed again. She opens the door and bolts out of the room. He stands up and watches her run down the hallway, but luckily doesn't follow her. She tells her coworkers all about it, but she does not call the police because my mom was so embarrassed that she was dumb enough to do all of that for him. A few days later, while walking into work, she sees a bunch of cop cars surrounding the building. She later finds out from a coworker that the guy was arrested for solicitation of prostitution. I think that is what he was charged for, at least. She was freaking out that she would get in trouble for getting into that situation, but the officers never asked her to come in for questioning. 2 weeks later, while walking to her parked car in a back alley, she saw him sitting in his car watching her with a big smile. I guess he got out on bail. She ran to her car and sped out of there. That was the last time she ever saw him, and she moved back home a few months later. Seeing as a lot of people enjoyed my previous story, I will continue sharing my not-so-wholesome adventures from the ghetto. This one, though, is slightly darker than the previous. It deals with attempted kidnapping and trafficking and/or murder. Who the heck knows? Not me, I'm still here. As can be inferred from the word ghetto, for anyone unfamiliar with my last story, my neighborhood was pretty horrible. crime rate-wise, with a strong divide between ethnic groups. Seeing as I am Russian, my friends were also Russian, and what friends they were. Ron, Andre, and Eli were my best friends in 5th grade. We were the coolest 10-year-olds ever. So cool that we had our own zula. A zula is a Hebrew slang word describing a private place, usually built by you, where you and your buddies come to chill and hang out. I guess the American equivalent to a zula would be a treehouse. Trust me, this is all very important info. Ron, Andre, and Eli and I found the perfect place to settle down and claim as our own. The ruins of a roof of an old bunker, next to a tree in the middle of a field on a hill. It was positioned on a somewhat steep hill, and it looked like a concrete bunker in a sea of tall yellow grass fields. We traveled the neighborhood in search of discarded items and furniture to bring to our little zula, and came back with a magnificent cum-stained couch, a rug, and old-school posters of naked ladies. Our zula was officially complete, the most wholesome one in town. Andre hung his naked ladies on our tree and was very proud of his work. Andre, Ron, and Eli had a tradition. They would skip school every Wednesday to hang at the zula, and since I was the tomboy, doesn't know that she's a lesbian girl yet, I terribly wanted to get into their boys club. So naturally, I'd start skipping Wednesdays with them. And for a while it was great. We'd play cards, discuss 5th grade politics, and prank call our neighbors. Until one day, Andre just had to do something stupid. You see, when little horny Andre picked up those naked damsels from the streets, he also picked up a business card, an escort service card. One Wednesday morning, Andre decided we just had to prank the poor hooker. Eli, whose role was to be the clique's official dumbass, instantly agreed it was a good idea. Ron and I, however, were a bit more skeptical of Andre's seemingly harmless ruse. But you know how peer pressure works so well on 10-year-olds. Andre calls the number and puts it on speaker. It rang and rang until someone answered. A man who I can only imagine was the girl's pimp. The man told Andre he sounds like a big boy, in an incredibly creepy way. And mind you, Andre did have somewhat of a deep voice in comparison to normal 10-year-olds. So when Andre, that beautiful idiot, decided to seriously buy a hooker, he had no objections. Andre proceeded to give him the closest address to our zula and an exact description of how it looks. As soon as the call ended, Ron flipped out on Andre and left. Eli and Andre were super pleased with their prank, and I just sat there on the cum-stained sofa wondering what the heck we just did and if a hooker is seriously going to arrive here. Andre and Eli were sure the man got their joke. Well, he didn't. 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes pass and nothing. No hooker to be seen. We all laugh about our biggest achievement yet and completely forget about the "what a big boy voice you have" man. I thought it was an hour later or so. We saw a black van pull over on the street next to our zula's field. The address that Andre gave. Andre and Eli ignore my concerns regarding the inconspicuous van, and so I'm the only one watching it. It goes up and down the street as if it's trying to see if there's anywhere for it to drive into the field. Impossible, since it is sort of locked between apartment complexes and a cliff, and then pulls over again at the original spot. At this point, you'd expect a woman to come out, but no. Two men get out of the van and start walking uphill toward our field, toward us. I could feel myself screaming internally as I motioned my buds to look. We all sort of freeze and have a little, "oh man, what have we done" moment, and then one of the men yells, "Big boy, I need to ask you something." And we practically leave a cloud of dust getting the heck out of there. We ran up the grassy hill, which gets quite steep as you approach its peak, when Eli fell and scabbed his knee. We didn't notice him falling because he didn't even make a sound, and by the time we saw him, we were too far and even more terrified as the men were approaching him and us fast. So we left him there, like the cowardly 10-year-olds we were, and kept running. We reached another bunker in the upper street. It is Israel. Bunkers and shelters are everywhere, and hid in one of the 4 concrete shelter buildings, designed like big old boxes. We gently closed the metal door, sat in the farthest, darkest corner and waited. We could hear the men searching the other shelters, and at this point we were pretty sure we were going to be found. The moment came and the men opened our shelter's door. I remember his voice to this day. Cold, eerie, and disgusting. "We just want to talk. We came all this way for you." We screamed our lungs out, and by sheer chance, a couple people who were walking their dogs came to the area to investigate our cries. They scared away the men with threats of police, and their massive German shepherds, and thought that'd be that. We were so relieved, but then we remembered Eli. We quietly crept back towards our zula but didn't see Eli anywhere. Andre was the only one of us who owned a cell phone, so calling him was impossible. We thought maybe he managed to run back home, and that was our next destination. I remember we looked around carefully for the van. It wasn't parked in our vicinity anymore, so we walked down to that street, on a route that connects to my street and eventually to Eli's. We managed to get to my street, and at this point, we were sure the van and the men were gone. But we were wrong. They circled the neighborhood. We saw them coming back behind us. We freaked out and ran up a long case of stairs, the van almost hitting us and the stairs breaking with the screeching tire sound. And one of the men jumped out of it and started galloping up the stairs, chasing us like a crazed baboon, yelling disturbing things at Andre. "You have such a pretty ass. It's going to be mine." And that'd be the least disturbing comment of them all, believe it. We were not fast enough to outrun the man, and in the middle of the staircase, just as we were about to break left into a rocky terrain, he grabbed Andre. Andre was screaming so hard by now, I'd never heard him scream like this, and I was in tears. Then, in a moment of accidental courage, I picked up a rock and ran down towards the van. The man was so close to shoving Andre in the back of the van when I proceeded to snipe his head with my trusty rock. It made him let go of Andre, miraculously turning him into Speedy Gonzalez as he started to run away, still screaming his very soul out. I, on the other hand, was pretty much screwed. That man was so incredibly mad. I never saw somebody so mad in my life. The other man in the van yelled, "Grab her, she'll do," as I tried running away, but at this point it was futile. The man grabbed me by my hair and started dragging me towards the van. In what felt like hours being dragged to the van, I saw my older brothers running towards me with a metal pipe. They pried me out of the man's hand and proceeded to beat the living shit out of them. They were apparently distracted by Andre's ear-popping screams. They eventually let both of the men go. You got to understand, in our city and neighborhood, it takes the cops at least 30 minutes to arrive and nobody really trusted the police. Bros also feared they might call someone up to come and get them. This entire live-action movie was done with me getting the ass-whooping of my life from my parents. My brother's getting a badge of honor, Andre getting psychological treatment, and Ron getting a pizza right after he left us with our hooker calling consequences. Oh, and Eli got a cool cast on his arm when he broke it, as he fell down the cliff in an attempt to run away from our kidnappers. We later drew dicks on it, like real friends should. We never actually found out who those men were. Our parents forced us to get that business card and give it to the police, but the police never called us back. Don't even know if they investigated it. Our friendship slowly died as Andre, Ron, and Eli succumbed to our neighborhood's nature and became small-time drug dealers and started hanging out with questionable characters. So, moral of the story, don't ever go looking for hookers on shady business cards, not even to prank them. Also, don't skip school. In the summer of 2015, I was 33 years old, broke and jobless in Mexico City. My entire life had gone steadily down the drain for the past couple of years, and my best friend had moved back to Europe. I was tired and bored, so when an online friend I had met in person 2 years before invited me to spend a month in his farmhouse in Norway, I accepted without hesitation. The deal was simple. In exchange for some work at the farm, I would get some pretty sweet holidays in a country I always wanted to visit. I have no problem doing labor work, and in fact, I was looking forward to doing it and getting my body back into real action. Since I moved back to Mexico City from Canada in 2011, I had been feeling rusted and soft. So I packed my suitcase, put on my boots, and said goodbye to Mexico City, the best way I knew how, by getting pissed drunk. I arrived in Stavanger, Norway, but my suitcase decided to go to Thailand instead, so after an hour of filling out the reports and giving the address of my friend's house, I was able to walk out and meet him again. My friend Harold. He was standing there, confused and annoyed. He told me later that he was about to leave the airport, thinking I had decided not to take the flight after all. I guess I was lucky. That night I spent it with Harold and his friends in an oceanfront apartment in a quiet neighborhood in Stavanger, getting drunk on Norwegian beer and smoking hash. Disgusting stuff if you ask me. I prefer the real thing, but anyways, I felt welcomed and content. The next day, Harold drove me all the way to his farmhouse about an hour south of Stavanger in a community called Egersund. At least I think that's the name of the place I was in. Norwegian names and addresses are weird if you are not familiar with them. The land Harold owned was huge and beautiful. Not really sure how it all works, but on his property there is a lighthouse that attracts a lot of tourists from all over Europe. The house itself was kind of small, located on top of a hill with a huge bar next to it. Harold lived alone in the two-story house, but I was told the basement housed a tenant. As soon as I glanced at the basement window, I got a strange feeling of dread. There was a webcam facing the driveway, and the rest of the window was covered by boxes and papers. But I decided not to mention it since Harold didn't seem to care. I just assumed the guy was an eccentric man, or maybe it was just a normal precaution. considering we were more or less in the middle of nowhere with the neighboring houses separated by big fields. I just took my mind out of it and focused on the joy of being in Norway. After being installed in one of the bedrooms upstairs, I was informed that week Harold's son's wedding was going to be celebrated, and thus the house would be filled with the bride's family from Bergen, I think. In general, it was great to meet them, but on my second night, when everybody had gone to sleep, and Harold and I were still up chatting and drinking beer, I got to meet the tenant, Olaf. Harold had been having some troubles with his new smartphone, and apparently Olaf was tech-savvy and had indeed been the one purchasing the phone for Harold. We went downstairs to Olaf's basement. Now, Harold kept telling me he didn't like Olaf and was actually upset by the way he kept the newly remodeled basement, but from what I understood, they had some kind of relationship more than just landlord-tenant. The basement was dark, all the windows covered, and piles of junk cluttered the entire place. The bedroom was full of computer parts and electronic junk he had blinking and beeping. Olaf invited us to sit down, and when he turned on a desk lamp to check Harold's phone, I got the first real good look at him. He was in his mid-40s for sure, but looked older. He has a shaved head, pretty skinny, a large nose, and has deep shadows under his eyes. He had the entire look of a meth addict. I should know since I worked in a recovery house in Surrey, British Columbia, in Canada. I had seen the same face back then in people who were dealing with severe addictions. The way he stuttered only confirmed further my observations, and I decided to keep an eye on him. My gut told me right then and there he was trouble. Olaf finished with Harold's phone and then directed his attention to me. He asked me if I wanted to see some porn, to which I declined entirely. I just wanted to leave that dark, oppressive basement. Harold laughed a drunken laughter and asked Olaf if he had gay porn, to which Olaf said he didn't care about the sexuality of the videos, that he simply liked to see people getting things introduced in them. When he said that, I got chills running down my spine, and I asked myself if he meant it in just a sexual way or if there was a more ominous meaning to it, but we didn't stay to find out. Harold had a busy day the next day, and I was tired and thoroughly creeped out by him. When we were back in the house, I asked Harold if he trusted his friend, to which Harold answered that Olaf wasn't his friend. He was just an addict renting the basement. The government paid Harold the rent, and a nurse visited him twice a week to bring him his medication. And after dropping that bomb, he said goodnight and went to his bedroom. I tried not to think about Olaf, but between my gut feeling and him popping into the house unannounced, when everybody else was out preparing for the wedding that weekend, I couldn't really relax. The first time he went inside was to give me a flash drive with movies he had illegally downloaded from the internet. He made sure to emphasize the illegal part. The second time he seemed high and wanted to simply let me know if I needed anything. I could ask him for anything at all, but asked me to not tell Harold about him going upstairs. He said that and then walked out very slowly and carefully, as if he knew he would fall if he rushed. When the wedding was over and the house was again empty except for Harold and me, the encounters with Olaf became stranger and more often. One time, while I was in the kitchen fixing myself some breakfast, I turned around to find Olaf standing in the kitchen doorway, bleeding from his nose, staring at me. I jumped out of my skin and dropped my breakfast, making a huge mess, but he didn't even seem to notice. He simply started babbling incoherently while directing his cloudy eyes to the ceiling on the top of my head. I was petrified, trying to think of a train of actions that wouldn't trigger a violent response on him, when he simply turned around and quietly walked out of the house. I started locking the door whenever I was alone in that house since that day. When I told Harold about all of this, he got visibly mad and went downstairs to talk and yell at Olaf. Harold told me he didn't like to have him in his basement, and he had tried to kick him out several times, but the government had always ruled against evicting Olaf, and Harold's sister was mostly responsible for that. She felt bad for the guy and was 100% on Olaf's side, just because he had the same name as her father. Go figure. So Harold had to learn to live with him in his basement, but only because Olaf was supposed to be clean and in treatment for his addiction. After that day, Olaf stopped being friendly with me and just became a cold, invasive presence in my life there. There was one day when I was in the barn chatting with a couple of Harold's friends, when Olaf entered the barn to place his laptop and some homemade-looking gadget by the window. Despite nobody asking him, he began to explain to us he was using it to hack into people's networks to get their Wi-Fi passwords, like everybody does it, right? He gave me a nasty glare and then stormed out. I turned to Harold's friends and told them I was completely afraid of him and that I had this feeling that he would attack me one day. Harold's friends told me that would never happen, but if I ever felt I was in real danger, I could give them a call and they would pick me up. We exchanged numbers, hugged, and said goodbye for the night. The next days, things between Harold and me turned sour. mostly because I wasn't feeling safe anymore and I had expressed my wish to instead go to Germany to visit the man who is now my husband. Apparently, Harold had hoped for us to grow closer, but had failed to let me know. In the end, I was exhausted and didn't want to deal with any of that anymore. I should mention that Harold has a severe alcoholism disorder, and I wasn't aware of it until that month I spent with him, seeing him get filthy wasted on a daily basis. To some that might be attractive, but not to me. So altogether, the situation was bad and I wanted out. I had done my job and I had done nothing wrong, and I wanted to be able to relax away from them both. The night I decided to organize my flight to Germany from Norway, Harold went out to get drunk and didn't come back until the morning the next day. I had tried to stay up and wait for him to talk, but I must have fallen asleep at some point. I woke up to the sound of the front door being closed, and I caught a glance of him walking towards the barn with the dog and a 6-pack of beers through the living room window. I then tried to send him a message through Facebook, but I discovered the internet was down. That's weird, I thought. And the whole time I'd been there, the internet never failed. Not even once. I went to the router and restarted it a couple of times to no avail. I decided to let it be. Maybe Harold had cut the internet as some way of drunk childish punishment, so I would just get on with my morning routine and have breakfast before going to knock on the barn door. That would give him some time to blow off some steam, I thought. I went downstairs to the bathroom, got comfortably naked, and jumped in the shower, ready to refresh myself and sing a couple of songs to lift up my spirit in preparation for the grim talk that awaited me with Harold. Halfway through the first song, I heard a loud bang coming from the front door, followed by somebody screaming my name. I thought it must be Harold, drunk and angry. I sighed while turning off the shower, thinking I was going to have a long argument when the bathroom door slammed open, and I saw, to my horror, Olaf coming at me with a completely deranged expression on his face, wielding a big cutter knife, the kind employees use in warehouses to open boxes. For a few seconds, I couldn't think or focus on anything other than the knife in his hand and the fact that I was naked, wet, and cornered in a small bathroom in the middle of Norway, also in the middle of nowhere. I was paralyzed. My biggest fear was actually happening. I couldn't scream or move, just stare at the knife he kept pulling and pushing, making that now horrifying noise those blades do when operated. I was about to pass out when Olaf's screams brought me back to the gravity of the situation. He was yelling, accusing me of playing Harold's feelings. He was calling me a liar, a filthy Mexican, and throwing in some threats about cutting me open and screwing me up if I tried to take anything from Harold. That, I think, is what got my gears moving once again. Him calling me a thief. I can be called whatever, but I'm certainly not a thief, and I'm also not a liar. So standing there getting myself angry at the psycho in front of me threatening my life, my training from the recovery house in Canada kicked in. I remembered the rules when dealing with altered addicts. Make eye contact. Keep your hands down so you don't startle them. Speak in a calm but dominant voice, and always refer to them by their name. And that's exactly what I did. Despite the fear and the certainty of me being stabbed to death, I stared at him in his cloud-crazy wide-open eyes and said, "Olaf, you are the thief. You are the one who keeps stealing Harold's silverware, Olaf. You are the one who keeps breaking in his house. Harold is not your friend, Olaf. Harold doesn't even want you living here." It was a long shot, but it worked. My words made him confused, and I was able to take one single small step forward, making him take one small step back. He then charged at me again with his rant and wielded his knife to my chest and neck. I could feel the cold sweat dripping on my back and a burning void forming in my stomach every time he launched the knife forward. But I didn't flinch. I stood my ground and kept repeating the same words to him. Every time, getting another step, pushing him little by little out of the bathroom. He might have noticed what I was doing, but by then it was too late. When he took the last step out of the bathroom doorframe, I moved as fast as my terrorized body allowed me to, and slammed the door on his stupid crooked nose. I locked it immediately and pushed it against it with all my body, while a storm of curses, punches, and kicks rained on that little farmhouse door. I remember praying to a God I don't really believe in to hold the door in place, to keep that psycho addict outside. There was nothing I could use in that bathroom to defend myself. Nothing against an infuriated high psychopath wielding a knife and possibly a broken nose. After what seemed to have been an eternity, I heard and felt the last super strong kick to the door, and then, to my relief, he stormed out of the house with a loud bang of the front door announcing his exit. However, I stayed put for another 20 minutes or so, not able to breathe or think anything else than keeping that door closed. I wanted to throw up, but I couldn't move. Eventually, my senses came back, and I knew I had to act quickly. I opened the door of the bathroom, flew upstairs, got dressed, and then exited the house through the window to the garden. I knew he could hear me moving on the first floor, and he had his stupid camera spying on the driveway. I jumped to the garden, jumped the fence, and ran around the house to the barn. I kicked and banged and screamed for Harold to let me in, but it was useless. The drunk bastard was living his drama, and I needed help, so I ran all the way to the next house where his sister lived, rang the bell, and when she opened it, I explained to her as best as I could what had just happened. She didn't speak a word in English, so it was a comical exchange for about 10 minutes until her expression shifted from confusion to absolute terror, mirroring my own. She walked me up to the barn, opened the door, commanded Harold to guard me, and went straight to the basement to confront Olaf. I was shocked and shaking, still trying to explain to Harold what had just happened. His drunken state was gone by the time I had finished explaining. He too went to the basement, and I could just hear the screams. They took him out. The sister and her husband got Olaf in a car and took him away. Harold stayed with me all day. I drank a lot of beer, but I simply couldn't get drunk. I wanted to get drunk. I wanted to forget, but I simply couldn't. I was told that Olaf admitted to having the knife and that his intentions were to make me fight him. So in reality, he wanted an excuse to stab the heck out of my naked butt. After all, he liked to see people having things introduced to them, right? That night, I slept in the house while Harold kept guard of the house. I had some tools with me to defend me, and of course I slept fully dressed. It was a horrible night. The next morning we went to the police to file a report, but even the cops seemed baffled and couldn't believe something like that could ever happen in their small, peaceful, picture-perfect community. But they believed me, and the cop who took my statement asked me if there was somewhere I could go while they sorted out all the mess with Olaf. I told them that in fact I was planning to visit Germany the very next day. That last day I barely spoke with Harold. I didn't blame him, but he told me that in his drunken state, he had told Olaf I was leaving and he was sad about it. Since Olaf had been doing drugs all night, he understood he had to defend Harold, so Olaf, cut off the internet, waited for me to go in the shower, and went upstairs to do his job. I left Norway without a single word, not looking back. They told me I could testify via Skype whenever the trial started, so they took my information and promised me justice would be served. It's been more than a year now, and I've never heard back from the police. When I asked Harold about it, he told me the police dropped the case for lack of evidence, and Olaf is back in Harold's basement doing whatever it is he does. Life goes on. I was angry for a while, but even anger goes away after a while if there is nothing to burn. I try to focus on the good things of life and life itself. Every day is now a gift, or a chance, but the shadow of fear never really left me. I keep looking over my shoulder, keep studying. People just in case I have to defend myself. I still have a sense of dread whenever I take a shower, especially at the gym where I'm more vulnerable. I can't help thinking that anybody else would have ended up floating a corpse in a pool of blood in that shower unnoticed for hours and hours until someone had to use the bathroom. If I had done something different, if Olaf hadn't been so high to be intimidated by my words, that bloated corpse would have been me. I still don't know how to get rid of that thought, but I try. All I know is that Olaf is free, and I really, really, really don't want to see him ever again. I first met her many years ago at a festival. I'm a professional artist and I sell my work at festivals and conventions. She was being harassed by a creeper near my booth, and my friend, who saw the whole thing, offered her to ride behind the booth with us. We were all girls in our early 20s, so I thought nothing of it. We quickly became friends, and she would visit me whenever I was selling art at a nearby event, and she would help me out with work as well. I've met many amazing lifelong friends this way, and I thought she would be another good friend and invited her to my house for a tea party. I like very tame parties, after knowing her for over a year. All went really well, and she was very fun with everyone. Then one day I get a phone call from her crying and being incoherent. I could understand each word and sentence she said, but nothing she said made any sense collectively. It's hard to explain, but she just kept saying things that were grammatically correct, but no real information was conveyed. I was immediately worried about her safety and somehow got it through to her that she could stay over at my place, so she came over. In person, she explained more, but it was still really hard to understand her. She said something about breaking her teeth and her family being toxic, so I thought she was being abused at home. Later, she revealed that her teeth had nothing to do with her family, and it was actually because she had fainted from not eating and hit the floor, breaking her teeth. But her family wasn't starving her, and they were worried about her not eating as well. Then she talked about being unhappy with her school life and wanting to find a job so she could move out of her toxic family's home. She never explained why her family is toxic, just that it was, and I didn't want to question her too much. I came from a toxic family myself and felt nothing but sympathy for her. I figured her patchy story was because she was distressed. I let her stay for as long as she wanted, but she chose to only spend the night. Later she thanked me and said she was surprised that I helped her when none of her closer friends did. I thought her so-called friends were just assholes, but I would soon find out why the hard way. From that event on, she would frequently call me to talk about her troubles. All were slightly confusing and hard to understand, but not as incomprehensible as the first call. I ended up staying on the phone with her for hours each time, comforting her and giving her advice, though it was hard since she didn't make a lot of sense. All of her troubles were vague, like I saw my brother. Okay, but what did he do? He doesn't feel real. What does that even mean? I was getting frustrated because these calls were so long and frequent and we just went in circles and I didn't even know what she was trying to say. Then she started just showing up at my house without telling me. I'm a busy person with a lot of work, so I don't normally just have free time to hang out, but I always tell myself that if it's to help a friend in need, whatever her vague issues were, that it's okay. She would bring a lot of gifts each time as thanks, despite me telling her not to waste her money on me. Since she wanted to move out, she needed to save up. Sometimes I would spend the weekend with my boyfriend at the time, and he would wait outside my apartment and then leave a gift at the door without ever telling me. It's weird, but I just figured that's her way of showing thanks, and I should appreciate it. This goes on for about a year. One day I was celebrating another friend's birthday when she texted me sounding really upset. I called her, but the signal was bad, so only text went through. She started saying crazy shit like there's no way I could actually be nice to her and that I must be faking it so that I can laugh at her behind her back. I was really hurt because I spent so much time trying to help her, and out of nowhere she called me a fake. I asked her why she thinks that, and she explains it because I'm dating a guy. Apparently, she had gotten in her head that I'm a lesbian. I'm not, and she never mentioned herself being one either, so dating a guy makes me a liar, and therefore I am lying about helping her. At that point, my phone was dying, and I told her that. I also told her she needs to see a medical professional because I can't help her anymore. She says that it's proof that I'm a fake person and some other negative stuff. My phone dies, and I try to enjoy the rest of my friend's birthday since whatever is wrong with her is beyond what I can do. About a month later, I haven't heard from her, and then without warning, she is ringing my doorbell. After that last text conversation, I didn't want to deal with her anymore, so I just pretended that I wasn't home. As expected, she left a gift bag by my door, which I could see from the peephole. I didn't go out to get it, and after about 10 minutes, the door rang again. I felt something was off, so I stayed by the door and looked out. She would move the gift bag and go hide somewhere, then adjust the location of the bag, ring the doorbell and hide again. She did this for an hour, all the while texting me saying she did see a doctor, so she's all better now and I should open the door. I kept thinking if I just pretend I'm not home that she'll leave this time, but she didn't, and then suddenly I saw her hand come up and cover the peephole so I couldn't see out anymore. That freaked me out so much. I frantically texted my other friends for help, and they told me to call the cops, so I did. The police arrived in 5 minutes and asked her to leave. She lies to their face, saying that there's a misunderstanding, that I had invited her over to hang out because we were friends. Good thing the police knew my side of the story because she is a small and innocent looking girl and could have fooled anybody. They told her to leave again and told her I specifically did not want her there and I did not invite her. She lies again, but more crazy this time. She says that she's from Nebraska, where friends just visit each other without invitations. The police tell her this is California, so she can't do that. They finally escorted her away before I opened the door and thanked them. After that, I didn't hear from her for a year until I announced to my online followers of my art that I would be at the same festival that I met her at. She leaves a comment under my post saying she will come stalk me again. Literally her words. Except she said as if it were a funny joke, like, ha ha ha, she's definitely not a stalker. And how silly it was of me to have thought that. I was really stressed out because she's clearly unstable and who knows if she'll get worse. I contacted the cops and had my boyfriend tell her sternly to leave me alone or we will call the police. She acted very offended, like she's just a nice girl and why are we being mean to her? Thankfully that was the last that I heard from her, and it's been 2 years since. Now I know why none of her other friends offered her help when she first came to me. I wish they had warned me too. This happened about 3 years ago when I was 16. I had left high school and was working in a hair salon. That's where I met one of my best friends, Adam. Adam's mom lived around the corner from where I grew up and was good friends with my cousin. Small world, huh? So one weekend, I went around to his place for a few drinks. I met his mom, who was lovely. She was only 36 and really down to earth, and had an aura of motherly love who you could trust. We decided to go into the town center for a few beers. In my country, if you're with a parent or guardian, you can drink legally. You're having an awesome time, blowing off steam after a long week of work and sharing a bit of quality banter. We were at the pub for about an hour when a few of Adam's friends showed up, with a girl called Jay. I don't want to sound rude, but when I first met Jay, I honestly thought she was a man. She was very androgynous, with shoulder-length dirty blonde hair, a baggy orange t-shirt that almost came down to her knees, and navy blue cargo pants. This in itself is a crime against fashion, and I remember wondering, not in a mean way, why she was hanging out with Adam's friends, as they're all into fashion, and have no qualms in calling out fashion disasters. I excused myself to the ladies' room, and when I got back, Jay had moved around in the seat, so I would be forced to sit next to her at the end of the table, away from everybody else. No big deal, I thought. I'm a social person and always up for a new friend. She sat really close to me, almost rubbing up against me, even though there was a lot of space for her to move over. Red flag number 1. I passed this off as me being big on personal space and her being a little bit tipsy. When she talked, she would lean in really close to my face and breathe stale beer and cigarettes almost directly into my mouth. I asked her to move over a few times, but after a few minutes, she would scooch back over. The conversation was normal, and at this point my creeper radar wasn't dinging. She mentioned she was from South Africa and moved here a few years ago with her mother. She told me she was a lesbian, and I asked if I was too. I told her I was bisexual, but was seeing a man. This is when she went off on a big tirade against bisexuals. If you're bisexual, you'll know what I'm talking about. People either think you're actually a lesbian and too scared to come out, or you're actually straight, just experimenting and trying to have the best of both worlds. She took the stance that I was actually a lesbian and didn't know it yet. This really made me mad. I don't appreciate being told by a stranger what my sexuality is. Thank you. After a few more beers, Adam, his mom, and I decided to head home for a smoke and a movie. I had basically been alienated from the table for the last hour, so I had missed out on talking to everybody else, but as it turns out, Adam's friends were going to a party later on and asked if we wanted to come. Neither of us were sure yet, so we agreed to head home, have a shower, and see how we felt. Adam didn't have a cell phone at the time, so I jotted down mine on a piece of paper and handed it to one of the boys. About 5 minutes into the taxi ride, I got a message. Are you coming to the party? We had just agreed to give them a call if we felt like coming later on, so I was a little annoyed with being hounded and didn't text back. 20 minutes later, my phone beeps again. You're the sexiest woman I've ever met. Whoa, whoa, whoa. At this point, I still thought it was Adam's friend, the one I actually gave my number to. He's a flaming gay, so naturally, I assumed it was a badly placed joke. Whatever. I texted back something like, not as sexy as you, Mr. Fabulous Pants. That was a huge mistake. My phone beeped again. It was nice meeting you. I want to see you again. Right now. Love, Jay. It was Jay. What? Up until this point, I had just put everything down to cultural differences, but now I was feeling very uncomfortable. I didn't text back after that, even though I received about 20 messages, all along the lines of, where are you, or why aren't you texting back? I have to see you right now. Where are you? Text me back right now. I showed Adam and his mom the text, and we all agreed the best thing I could do was ignore the text and hope she gives up. I turned off my phone, and after that, there was no way I was in the mood to go anywhere. We stayed in, had another few beers, and watched a movie. Cut to a few days later, and I was at a work function/party when I got a call from an unknown number. I answered it, thinking it might be a client. A lot of my boss's clients work really late, so they often call to book in after hours as her assistant. It's my job to take her calls. They're rich and can spend about $500 on a hair color in one sitting, so it's in the business's interest to take these calls. The one on the other end asked if she could have a date. I'd almost forgotten about Jay, and nothing the person on the phone said seemed out of the ordinary. Just asking if she could book in a date to be serviced. Of course you can, ma'am. What's your name and number? It's Jay and I need to see you now. I love you and I need you. I hung up the phone immediately and ran to the bathroom, bursting into tears. Having a mini panic attack in the middle of a very important work function, mascara streaming down my face, this was not a good look. For the salon or my career. I collected myself, turned my phone off, and was determined to power through the evening. No crazy bitch was going to stop me from being awesome at my job. I'm a strong, fabulous, career-oriented woman. Cut to the end of the evening, I was still a little shaken up, but had almost completely forgotten about the incident. I asked a coworker to drop me off at the train station so I didn't have to walk in the dark by myself. I might be fabulous, but not stupid. She dropped me off one street over, and as I went across the road, guess who came out of the bushes? That's right, Jay. It's not an exaggeration. She was sitting in the bushes waiting for me to come to the station. I only froze for half a second before I started power walking towards the train. I ran across the road, almost getting my dumbass hit, but I was too scared to look both ways, all the while being highly aware of the shrieking coming from behind me. I love you, she shouted. I won't let you go. You need to know you love me. I will make you love me. I was at my wit's end. I certainly wasn't going to let her follow me on the train. There was no way I was going to be in a confined space with this devil, and there was absolutely no way I was going to let her follow me home. I sprinted to the ticket booth and started screaming between my sobs that I was being followed and to call the police, please. I made a complete spectacle of myself. People were looking and the ticket officer was trying to calm me down. The poor man pulled me into his office and made me a cup of tea while I waited for the cops. They showed up after about 10 minutes or so, and I told them everything and showed them the text messages. There were about 50 more since I had turned off my phone at the function. I couldn't even bring myself to read them, and the police officer told me that was probably a good idea. Since she hadn't physically hurt me, the police told me there was not a lot they could do but follow a restraining order. I don't know her last name, her address, or what she did. I couldn't even be sure Jay was her real name. Her number was prepaid, so there was no more information on her from that avenue. Deep end. The police drove me home and told me to give them a call if anything else happened. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I changed my number and asked for a few days off work. My boss was actually really understanding, and I spent 2 days locked in my room with a giant tub of ice cream, trying to process and understand that this had happened. Skip to a week later, and I get a call from the police to come down to the station. They had arrested a woman who had claimed I was her girlfriend and that I would bail her out of the cells. She had given my old cell phone number for them to call. It was Jay. Somebody had called in about a suspicious-looking man, LOL, hanging around the train station, accosting and threatening other patrons and defecating on the platform. They found a knife, some meth, and letters written in blood in her bag. I was told she was on parole for beating her ex-girlfriend nearly to death and was heading back to jail. I've since moved from that town, changed my name. Not because of this, and changed professions, but I'm still terrified that one day when she gets out, she will find me again and I might end up like her ex-girlfriend, beaten near to death. So I and my friend were relocated with work for 6 months. We found a flat and off we went. Everybody that lived in the flats was really friendly and everybody said hello to each other. Very lovely people. There was one guy who liked to travel. He told us he was off to Thailand. On his return, he had brought with him a guy that he had met over there who was looking to rent a room somewhere. He was polite also, saying hello, and he would wave from his window. We stopped seeing the owner so much, and I know everybody else started asking the tenant if the owner was okay as well. He used to play his TV really loudly, and nobody had heard of it for a while. The guy was charming, and oh no, we did this last night. We had dinner. After a couple of days, we didn't see him either. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I get home. Police everywhere. I had to sign into my building with the police. As I walked up the stairs, the smell hit the back of my throat, and I couldn't hold back my throw up. The tenant had used the owner's phone to text the owner's family, saying he was fine and not to contact him as he was going away again for a week or so. In reality, the tenant had killed the guy by hitting him around the head at least 12 times with either a hammer or a bat and then left him there. To make it worse, his pregnant daughter found him. There would have been a lapse, so all the time that he was saying hello to us and the other neighbors and telling us that everything was fine, he was in fact living with a dead body wrapped up in a rug in the flat. We later found out he had murdered him and transferred a measly $7,000 from his account to his own and then run away to Thailand. The scariest thing about this man was now knowing that he had murdered somebody and had remained so calm, planning his getaway while staying in the flat with his victim and still being cheery with the neighbors. And I now know that the day he stood at his window waving at me and smiling, he was in the same room as the body that was found, which makes me feel really sick knowing that poor guy was with him and I just stood there waving. The story I'm about to tell you is one that seriously negatively affected me in my life. I'm not sure how this will come out. I've never tried writing the memory before. I'm nearly 26 now, and at the time this took place, it carried on for about a year. I was 18. I am also female if that matters to you. At the time, way back when I was 18, I was fascinated by sculpting and pottery. I was attending college in the next town along from mine, doing a beauty therapist course that I really ended up having no interest in. I met a whole lot of creeps, which is a story for another day. After college every Tuesday, I had managed to find a pottery class in my town, so I would catch the bus from college back to town and go to pottery class and then walk home. I was going to this class for about 2 months, at least, before the guy who would change everything walked in. He arrived on his own and was extremely visibly shy and anxious. Cool, I thought. I myself suffered from anxiety, so I thought we had some common ground already. His name was Francis. Francis would never look you in the eye. He would look sometimes quite wildly from one point to another just above your head when he was talking to you. And when he was listening, he would stare at the floor. He was really intelligent though, and quite eloquent too. And other than his little quirks, he was really interesting to talk to and had a lot of cool ideas about life. I liked him. He was kinda tall, about 6 foot. Long story short, when he told me he was 17 too, I was pretty happy and we became really good friends really quickly. So we started hanging out other places than pottery class. I even went to his house a few times and met his parents and sister. His sister was a lot younger than him, but I don't remember how old exactly. Maybe 4. His mom was Polish but spoke excellent English. His dad reminded me of Carlisle Cullet, and the way he looked at me made me shiver. He had this weird deadness, maybe coldness, behind his eyes that would phase in and out, and it just looked like pure hatred. By this point, we had become an item. His parents were delighted and immediately began discussing marriage, and that sort of freaked me out. It wasn't even in a jokey way of discussing it, like parents might do to embarrass you or tease you. They made it sound like I had entered a contract. My first real red flag was how intense Francis became only the first 2 days after we were an item. He would handwrite me poems, ranging from 3 to 6 A4 pages in length. In all honesty, they were some of the best poetry I'd ever read, my favorite being Die for Dreams, which turned out to be by E. E. Cummings word for word. I thought he was just joking or wanted to impress me but couldn't write himself, so I ignored the compulsive lying regarding his poetry. Then the calls and texts started. I would silence my phone at college, and when I checked it at any point in the day, I would have a horrifying number of missed calls, like sometimes hundreds, no joke, and texts that were so long I didn't even finish most of them. They were all ramblings of how his love for me had surpassed everything in his life, and I was his heir and reason, and he would do anything for me. This is only days into the relationship. I should have been seriously put off, right? Yep, but I felt sorry for him. I did what you really shouldn't do and ignored my gut instinct. He was pretty isolated apart from his family and me, and he had no other real friends. I just thought he was attention-starved and he would level out eventually. But this is when things spiraled out of control. Shortly after my 18th birthday, Francis had settled down to letters and texts slightly, but I still got quarter-hourly calls a day and intermittently through the night. Now, bearing in mind that we hadn't had intercourse or even done more than kiss at the time, I had a big thing about not feeling ready to go further with him, and I didn't ignore it, but we had sexted playfully, and I had sent him a couple explicit pictures. Please never do this, ladies, by the way, it never ends well. His mom found them. Well, no, to be specific, he showed her them casually one day. She went mad. I checked my phone as I left college one day, and apart from the usual missed calls from Francis, I had 14 from his mom. Weird, I thought, and hit redial. She immediately informed me that she had spoken to a lawyer and she was going to ruin my life. I could almost hear her spitting as she screamed down the phone at me, calling me names and at one point threatening my whole family. I was stumped. It was a massive overreaction to a topless photo or two and some badly done dirty talk text. I was pretty freaked out. This is when she said it and my stomach dropped. He is 13, you frickin' creep. I'm going to ruin your life. The entire time up to this point, she had gone along with him being nearly 18, picking out prospective universities, him being a child prodigy. He was actually very talented at piano, guitar and saxophone, and even violin. Our relationship, everything a lie, and her son was 13. He looked, behaved, spoke, and generally checked out like somebody my age, and I believed them. Of course, because why would somebody help their son to lie about something like this? She had twisted a bunch of evidence together out of text and the pictures and a picture he had sent me during that day, and she was going to the police with it. I was 18 now, and where I live, this meant I could get in big trouble. But they were never clear about it, almost as if they had planned it all along, because I had no evidence in email or text / witness form of them saying he was 17, and she flat out denied that she had ever said that and had always told me he was 13 and she didn't agree with the relationship. Soon my friends stopped talking to me. People who knew me locally started staring, and I got hate mail, all because of a rumor went around that I was a child abuser. I ceased contact with Francis and his family, and they eventually had said they wouldn't go to the police, but only because they accidentally deleted the evidence. I was too scared to tell anyone. She was so descriptive about how she would ruin my whole life and reputation, and how she would destroy my family's lives also. I just hoped it would go away. I quit college. I couldn't go outside. I was even getting death threats, but if I went to the police, I was scared they would think I was really an abuser. I had a mental breakdown, owing to the fact Francis wouldn't stop calling and emailing and Facebooking, and even turning up and threatening to kill me and set my house on fire if I didn't come back to him and marry him. He stole $2,000 off his dad using his card to order an engagement ring. He got another girlfriend who was a photo of a model from Thailand, who was in her 20s and didn't even know Francis, to try and make me jealous. He kept demanding he was 17, 19, 16, 17 again. He kept sending me horrific videos that he found online that I wasn't even sure was legal. He threatened killing me. He tried everything to get a reaction. He knew I wouldn't go to the police because he made it clear he would tell them I showed him private things he didn't understand, and hadn't really deleted the messages. I never replied to him though. For months, the emails continued. I had blocked him on every media and phone I could, but I couldn't figure out how he kept finding my email address. Later in the year, I heard from the girl involved that he had held her at knife point after his parents left him to babysit his sister because she wouldn't be intimate with him. She managed to lock herself in the bathroom, and he hacked the door pretty bad with the kitchen knife. His parents got back but refused to believe the girl before he eventually stabbed his mom in the shoulder in a fit of wild rage, and only then were the police called and the girl allowed to leave. He was diagnosed as autistic and never punished by the police. Personally, I have never met somebody with autism who is anything like Francis, and I do know a lot of autistic people, so I am skeptical, but I really don't know. As I mentioned at the beginning of this post, I am 26 soon, and I haven't heard from him since he stabbed his mom 2 years ago. I've been left emotionally scarred by Francis and his family, and I have waited so long to share my side of the story about this crazy family. This happened a few months ago to my friends and me. We are university students in Cape Town, South Africa, so when we aren't trying to just get through the semester, we like to let our habits get the better of us and go out for drinks. On this night, we had just finished what felt like an extra long day at university and decided to head to a bar about 5 minutes from campus for some much needed stress relief. The evening was going well, although a bit slow. It was enjoyable with everybody having a drink and getting a bit restless. So me, being one of the more outgoing ones in the group, I suggested that we head to the pool bar not far from where we were. Everybody agrees and we get our stuff to go. We all jump in my car and we get to the bar. But being a Thursday night, parking was scarce. I finally managed to find a spot about a block away from the bar, but in a secluded side street. I should also mention that this bar is in one of the sketchier parts of town, but is normally quite safe, due to the amount of nightlife associated with being so close to a university. We walked to the bar, and nobody really felt uneasy, nor did anything happen to make us feel that way, which was quite surprising. After a few hours of swimming in the pool and just relaxing, we decided it was time to grab dinner before restaurants closed, as being in South Africa means that most restaurants, even fast food, close really early, at around 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., to comply with the curfew. We decided to stop at the pizza place below the bar to grab some food before we all decided what the plan for the end of the night was. So because our group was so large and the pizza place was so small, we decided to have those getting food go inside while the others who didn't would just wait outside on the street. This was an easy decision, as the pizza place had a massive open window with a built-on counter, so we could still all talk to each other. This is where things started getting a little bit weird. While we were waiting for our friends inside the pizza place to come out, this massive white van pulls up past us and stops. The driver wasn't an intimidating looking dude. He was skinny, looked to be about average height, with shoulder-long blonde hair. Pretty standard looking dude for the kind of area that we were in. He calls me and asks if I think the van could fit in a parking spot just behind it. For perspective, this parking spot could probably fit a small hatchback maybe. This dude is driving a full-size long panel van. It makes me kind of uneasy, as I thought that as a driver of a car, you should know where your car can definitely not fit, and this was one of them. I explained to him that I didn't think it was worth attempting. He responds telling me that he has faith in his ability and I should come stand behind the van and direct him in. This gives me huge red flags, and after a few back and forths, he just pulls the emergency brake and sits and stares at my friends and me for what felt like an eternity. He then thanked us and drove off. This sparks my friend to come outside from the pizza place as they just saw what happened and were very confused. We are all kind of weirded out at this point, but try to think nothing of it, and everybody eats their pizza, and we try to decide what the plan is for the last hour or two that we have left before curfew cuts things short. Most of us decide this is where the night is going to end, as we're all kind of weirded out by the guy in the van. A few others decided that they were going to stay and just Uber home a little later in the evening. With our group number cutting down to 4, we decided to walk back to the car and just head home. When we left the pizza place, a homeless person called us and was insisting we had nothing to worry about with the guy in the van, which didn't help with anyone's nerves. We then decided to head to the car, but as soon as we turned the corner to approach the side street where the car was parked, we saw a van man again. This time, he was not quite so happy as he seemed in his encounter earlier. I made a cheeky comment about him finally finding a parking spot that he could fit in while we were walking past each other, and he just stared at my friends and me, not breaking eye contact even when we passed him. I turned around to see if he was still looking. He was, but as we turned the corner of the side street with the car, I saw it and my heart sank. The van, horribly parked half on and half off the sidewalk, has its back door slightly open. Upon seeing this, I turn around and see Van Man is now walking towards us, but he said something that confused me at first and immediately made sense after. He said, "Hey, please just watch my car," which was confusing to me, but when he said that, 4 men sat up from leaning on the wall next to it and began following us. My friends and I were slightly ahead of them, so we were trying to discuss the game plan, because it was obvious if we did nothing, something horrible was going to happen. My friends start walking faster, and I remain at the same speed, frantically searching my pockets for my car keys, all while shouting at my friends to wait up and asking what the rush was. All in hopes the guy behind us who were gaining on us were oblivious to us, knowing they had sinister intentions. As soon as the car came into view, we booked it, jumped in and drove away, but we were only seconds from not being that lucky. After locking the car doors, I saw the men surrounding the car. I managed to get us out, and looking back in the mirror, I saw a 5th man by the van at the bottom of the street. I still have no idea what their intentions were that night, if it was to rob us or just beat us up or worse. I don't really like to think about how lucky we were that night. I ask that when you're out, no matter how innocent an interaction with someone may seem, always pay attention to the little things. I'm a student in a South American country. I speak English and French, so I tutor people in my free time to make some money to buy textbooks and medicines. Because of the pandemic, many of my students could not pay anymore, so I was left with nobody until this guy showed up. He's like a 50-year-old, loud, weird dude. He has a daughter my age. I'm 19 and a wife, and yet every time he talks about them, he's either trash-talking his wife or saying stuff about his daughter, like she's really sexy, and talking about her boyfriends. Real scary. I've been tempted to stop teaching him, but until I find other students, I can't. The thing is, we live in the same city, and we have not met, yet he's obsessed with finding out my address. He says stuff like I'm beautiful, or it's so strange that I don't have a boyfriend. He draws, but he doesn't draw suns and flowers. He only draws naked women, and he draws them while looking at me during our classes. Luckily, these are online classes, but I swear every time I have to teach him, 5 times a week, I want to run away. He always talks about how hot he was when he was young, about how many women he used to sleep with. He says the most sexiest things, he says. He has another daughter who is 9 years old. And he says he's always worried about her turning gay, because he can deal with a whore daughter but not a lesbian. It's just non-stop inappropriate comments about women, about me, and about my sexual life. He knows I'm struggling with money, and he always takes advantage of that. Lately, he asks for my address always. I laugh and play dumb, changing topics, but he insists, saying things like, "I want to know where you live so we can hang out." He's so awful, but last week he got really scary. He said he had another student for me. I said great. The next morning, I woke up to 5 messages of him asking me personal info for the new student, and of course asking for my address. The thing is, he found an address. My last address. I moved some months ago, and the address he found and showed me was my last address. I'm not stupid. I've never put my personal info online. This guy is obviously a programmer. He works with computers, and he's really good at it. And I'm scared because the only place he could have found that address is a government website, as it is listed on my current address. I have not changed it. He also found out my full name, but I only gave him my first name. I even always use VPNs, and I have a full system protecting my phone and laptop that my cousin installed. and I even have tried searching my address online, and it doesn't even show up. So I'm freaked out. Every time I go out, I'm afraid I will encounter him in the street. This happened many years ago, but I've just discovered that the person in question has been released from prison. In my mid-20s, I was bouncing around. I couldn't settle on what to do, and after a long and crappy relationship, I was mostly interested in having fun. I was at university, but wasn't the most committed student. I had been working at a restaurant and a hotel, but hated it, and a friend told me about working as a receptionist in a brothel. It's completely legal where I live, and said the money was decent. It fit in well with university, and it wasn't difficult. And if the clients were rude, you could just kick them out. Unlike hospitality, where you had to be polite all the time. I found a place that was looking for receptionists and went for an interview and got a job. And it was fine. I mean, not the most interesting job in the world as you can imagine, but it paid okay. I could smoke out the back when cigarettes didn't cost $50 a pack. I could study if it was quiet. And I know what everybody is thinking at this point. Receptionist is code for sex worker. And I promise it isn't. I have no proof, but lying about it doesn't make the story any better. In fact, if I were a sex worker, it might even be more interesting. Sadly, no such excitement in my life. We had regular clients, and they all had reputations of some kind. This guy only books half an hour, but always extends his bookings at least once. This guy will pay extra for dirty talk. A lot of it was innocuous, just information passed between people that we as receptionists always heard about. But some of it was more along the lines of a warning. This guy will try and remove the condom, or this guy wants to spank but won't ask first. And then there was the doctor. The doctor had a lot of money and would potentially book multiple workers for a long time. He paid well for reasonably boring extras, like fancy lingerie or fantasy roleplay, aka nurses' uniforms, but he had a big red warning sign above his head. First time he came in, one of the other receptionists warned me. No one has to do an intro with him if they don't want to. Warn the girls it's the doctor. I called the intro. I went into the staff room and said, intro in meeting room 1, which generally meant that every available worker should go in and say their name and flirt. Whatever. After which one of the receptionists would find out who they want to see and how long for, and all the workers stood up and then said, it's the doctor. And all but 2 sat back down. So I immediately asked what the deal is. And they explained that he likes cocaine, he likes workers who like or pretend to like cocaine, and he's a neurosurgeon who gets access to weird drugs, and often his cocaine is far from pure. Not cut with drain cleaner, but cut with pharmaceuticals, like anesthetics, used for surgery. He also enjoyed a drug insertion. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks there. He was sometimes belligerent if workers refused him, after they started the blicking. And he was just very creepy. When we go on the check with him, he'd try and grab us and make us, the receptionist, sit down. And to be clear, I'm not what people would consider attractive. Plus, he'd do it with all the receptionists. He would grab our hands and try and stroke our arms. He had this super intense stare, like a mannequin that could actually make eye contact. I know that sounds insane, but it's hard to describe. It's like he was staring right into you but not seeing you at all. His expressions were weird and just didn't work on his face. Like his mouth would smile or move, but his eyes wouldn't change from that intense stare. I guess it might have been the cocaine, but it was deeply unsettling and just made you feel sick. Having all that, there were a few experienced workers who knew how to handle it. Get the most out of him while experiencing the least possible risk. It's possible to fake snorting a line. I did not know this before that point, hence given the workers the option to meet the client. I can't remember if he saw any more that first time. If I recall correctly, he had a handful of bookings in the time I was working there. We did have strict instructions not to ever let anyone do an alcohol with him. That is, booking at anywhere other than the brothel. Plus we had a few other harm minimization strategies. Then after a while, one of the workers who was okay with seeing him left to go traveling and nobody else would see him, so he gradually stopped coming in as nobody would introduce him. I moved on to receptioning at a different brothel. A new one had opened closer to where I lived and the pay was better, and he showed up again there. I knew he would frequent all the places he could, until his reputation overtook him. When he showed up at the new place, I told all the workers about him and nobody was okay with seeing him. He only tried a couple more times before he abandoned us. A year or so later, I had moved on to a different job. I couldn't do night shifts anymore, and I was chatting with a friend from the brothel who said, "Wow, did you hear about the doctor? He killed somebody and got arrested." And it was true. The doctor had killed a worker who had been sent to his apartment. The worker lay dead in his bed for 2 days. Officially, it was labeled as manslaughter and also pleaded guilty to supplying the drug that killed another worker. All of this happened because A, he's a terrible dumpster fire human, and B, because one awful brothel manager and the owners behind her put profits in front of safety and kept sending workers to bookings with him without giving them full warnings, and specifically sending inexperienced workers and without keeping them in-house. It later came out that the medical board had known of his cocaine addiction for many years prior to his arrest, and had helped cover up some botched surgeries. It was horrifying to hear about, and we both spent time telling stories that we knew about him, but then I mostly forgot about it. Then I was chatting to an old friend the other day who reminded me of him, and I got on Google. I found out that he's been released from prison. I hope he's not practicing medicine, but he could be anywhere now. Some years back, when I was a newly minted 21-year-old in the height of my explorative phase in life, I began participating in sex work. Now, technically speaking, the services that I provided did not violate my local laws, but individuals who did the same type of work I did often dealt with the same dangers as escorts, due to the in-person nature of the tasks. As a result, we all pretty much required the same type of screening for potential clients, both for safety and to avoid the hassle of police interaction. Trust me, even when you know you'll get to walk away, you don't want to spend your whole evening with a vice detective hell-bent on classifying you as a criminal or a trafficking victim through an hours-long game of, well, I just have a few questions. Because time is money, and even when it wasn't money, I had things to do, like spending the evening partying at my favorite dive bars. I learned very quickly from talking with other women locally through sport boards how to effectively screen for clients, and how to be assertive for my own safety. I rarely saw anyone who didn't have references from other sex workers, and if I did, I required proof of identification. I was lucky to have roommates who knew about my work and supported it completely. I never accepted clients to my home for any reason. Somebody always knew where I was, and with who. I would not accept rides from clients, and no voucher ID meant no appointment. So on a regular sort of day, I was sorting through the morning's messages I had gotten. Regulars quickly separated from veteran hobbyist with vouchers, and then one message from somebody who claimed to be new. As per usual, I informed him of the need to provide me with confirmation of his identity before scheduling could happen. He kept dodging this by asking me very explicit questions about specific services. This is a red flag even for escorts. Usually you're dealing with a cop who is fishing, or more commonly a creep, who wants to get off on free dirty talk and waste your time. I politely but firmly informed him I don't provide any of those services and that I didn't engage in explicit conversation. If he had been perhaps more discreet, some men will ask you if you like to talk about certain topics to actually see if you provide them as a service without actually talking about them to you. I might have offered to point him in the direction of someone who did like to talk about such acts. However, I already didn't like his demeanor, which disqualified him from any sort of referral because nobody wants clients like that. Reputation matters with the clients as much as the workers. At this rejection, he began sending me graphic messages about violent things he wanted to do to me. He began to claim he would just message me under a different account to trick me into meeting him, and that he would do whatever he wanted anyway. Now, that in of itself wasn't unusual. I had flustered men lash out. There are blacklists for a reason. A lot of people don't realize that sex workers in a locality or even a whole state are in contact through various means to scope out clients and the relatively tight-knit, in-person sex work community. What struck me, though, is that this person proceeded to continue to text me the same threats from various accounts until I explained. This was ill-advised, but I was mad. There would never be a situation where somebody doesn't know where I am or who I am meeting, and even if it did happen, I was malicious enough to ensure the police would be the least of their worries. Honestly, the only time having a sketchy drug-dealing boyfriend was beneficial. The text stopped. I was a little weirded out by it, but it sort of came with the territory. Add the number to the blacklist resources, let the other girls know, and so on. I figured since the messages stopped, that was fine. He probably found something more interesting to do. About 2 weeks after the text, one of my roommates was up early for classes, and when I woke up in the afternoon, he told me some weird guy had been on our porch that morning looking lost. This itself also wouldn't be too weird since we lived in a massive apartment complex near a large university. Think upwards of 40 buildings with a couple hundred units. People got the wrong apartment for themselves or their friends often. I once even drunkenly wandered into the right apartment in the wrong building once. We laughed about it, and my roommate described him in case he was a sketchy person casing apartments, which also sometimes happened. A skinny guy who was about 5'8" with brown hair and patchy facial hair. There is no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary until about a week later. It was evening and I had an appointment with a client. To avoid using my own car that clients could identify, I had taken to calling a cab. Very quickly, I ended up with the same driver, Jake, a few times. He caught on quick and really appreciated the large tips I left. Jake and I quickly struck up a friendship, and I had him in a speed dial as well as knowledge of his work schedule, so I could just have him drive me every time. I like consistency. So Jake pulled into the parking lot and called to let me know he was there and asked to come use my bathroom, to which I obliged. This wasn't a safety concern for me, as he worked for a registered taxi company with strict screening, and I had his cab number memorized. Plus, he really was a stand-up guy. So Jake comes up and I go to meet him on the porch. For context, the units had a full door you went through to get to a porch, and then the door to the apartment is accessible from the porch. Jake comes through the porch door, and I walk back through the front door so he can follow. Once I was inside, I heard the porch door open in a man's voice. I didn't hear what he said right away, but Jake turned to answer. I could see Jake was still not the man. Sorry, what? You're here for who? Jake asked. I'm here to see Claire, the voice said. Jake's eyes narrowed. Claire was the name I used for clients, never friends. It isn't remotely close to my actual name. I could feel my heart rate go through the roof. I didn't know what to do, but luckily Jake was a quick thinker and knew that nobody showing up to my place should be calling me by that name. Nah, man, you've got the wrong place. Nobody named Claire lives here. Jake shrugged sort of nonchalantly. The man muttered an apology, and I heard the porch door open and close again. Jake came inside, and I closed and locked the door behind him. We shared a what the actual heck look for a moment. I asked him what the guy looked like. He said he was about the same height as him, with messy brown hair and messed up facial hair. He added that he was also pretty scrawny. I told Jake I was pretty sure my roommate had seen the guy a week before. He reminded me to stay safe, used the bathroom, and then we left. At this point, I was freaked out over the next several days. There was no way the guy was just casing the place to break in or even had the wrong unit anymore. I wondered if the texts were connected. I couldn't prove it, and contacting the police was out of the question for my area. They're worse than useless if you have to explain you're being stalked because you're a sex worker. So I made sure my handgun was on the nightstand when I slept and always on my person when I left home. I was thankful I'd gotten my concealed carry license the moment I was 21. It gave me enough peace of mind to return to life as usual for about a month. At 5:30 a.m., I was out on a porch chair having a cigarette after a long cocaine. I've been off the stuff for years, by the way, and I don't recommend trying it. Bender. The chair was tucked into an alcove sort of area that made it so I wouldn't have been able to be seen from the path up to the building and also shielded my eyes from the early morning brightness. Then the door opened. My serotonin-depleted brain struggled to figure out what the heck was happening. All of my roommates, 3 total, were with family for a holiday weekend. My dumb drug dealer boyfriend had been MIA for a few days. Then I saw him, average height, a slim sort of wiry build, brown hair and a scraggly attempt at a beard. A chill ran down my spine instantly. He turned and saw me, sitting there alone. He actually looked shocked at the sight of me, though I could tell he recognized me. Luckily, my brain chemistry at that moment had kept my expression rather blank. Drugs are still bad, okay? Hey man, what are you doing? I asked. I didn't want to let on I knew he'd been there before. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking for Lily. He sort of stammered the words out. My face forgot to use its inside expressions at that moment, and I looked at this guy like he had 2 heads. You see, there was indeed a Lily in the apartment. However, I highly doubted she had any capacity to make any arrangements for visitors, seeing as she was my dog. The gun was in my room and not with me. The man continued. Yeah, I'm here to see Lily. Can I come in? I snapped out of my confused state at that point and started yelling as I shoved the man out the still open door back to the breezeway. Heck no. Get off my porch and don't come back. If I see you again, the first call will be to the coroner. He seemed genuinely shocked. I was so irate, I'm honestly surprised I managed to stop before I backed him up to the stairs. I went back to my porch to put out my cigarette, went inside and locked the door. Lily was going absolutely nuts, having heard me yelling. She immediately stopped once I was inside. I laughed to myself, thinking I should have just let him meet Lily. I don't think he knew it was the dog's name, but maybe heard it at some point while creeping around. I felt a lot better afterwards. I had confronted the monster I was worried about and wanted a physical confrontation. I was still iffy about whether the texts were specifically connected or not, but I definitely knew he was aware of my work without having been an actual client. At this point, being young and invincible, I was sure that was the end of it. I went back to my partying, recreational drugs, work, and my crappy boyfriend, Trey. Don't worry, that didn't last long either. Until about a month later, my boyfriend came into the apartment just a bit after I'd walked home from the bar across the street. He had a key and would let himself in whenever he felt like actually turning up. He threw a smashed phone on my bed. I asked him what that was about. Said he had seen the guy described at the back entrance of my building on a bike when he turned up. Apparently my boyfriend had baited him, asking if he knew which apartment Claire was in. The guy had smirked and given him my apartment number, asking if he was about to go have a good time. That was all the confirmation Trey needed that this was the creep I had been talking about hanging around. I also said I wasn't sure if he sent the texts. Trey wouldn't tell me what he specifically did aside from making the guy unlock his phone, revealing the initial text conversation in the app. Trey's hands were in his jacket pocket at this point, and he excused himself to go wash his hands. Seeing as nobody was reported found and Trey was a jerk but not a killer, I'm speculating the guy was taught much more physically this time, that he wasn't welcome. It was probably brutal since Trey was a big guy. After that, I never saw the guy or got any weird messages from him again. I'm not sure how he found where I lived, as I'm generally pretty good at privacy or his intentions. It's likely that he thought he was tougher than he really was when he made those threats, but thinking about seeing him in the flesh makes me laugh. I'm short, but I'm not a tiny lady. I had probably 50 pounds or more on him, and definitely could have taken him in my opinion. With that said, don't do drugs. Be safe and cautious if you're going to do sex work, and don't date drug dealers, and just be safe. If you want a big-ass boyfriend, just find a farm boy from the Midwest. All the hand-throwing on your behalf without the raging addiction issues. I have a very stable job and a very good one at that, but sometimes you need extra money, right? I'm currently moving into a newer, bigger, and nicer apartment, so I've been putting down payments and using money to move. By no means am I broke, but it's nice to earn some extra money. I thought of selling some clothes that I never wear. I've already donated a lot of older clothes to the Salvation Army, but for the clothes I never wore and that are worth some good money, I decided to sell them over on Craigslist and the Let Go app. The Let Go app has never failed me. Craigslist, well, I've never tried it before, but my friends have had some great experiences. I was trying to sell a very cute short sleeve, black and white flower dress for $12. I put my number down so I could just talk to people directly since I don't use my email too often. Side note, I posted a picture of me in the dress that my friend took, not showing my face and with a blank white wall background behind me. I got a couple of texts after I posted the dress. Here's how the conversation went for the first one. Stranger. Hey, I saw your dress on sale. Is it available? Yes, it is. It's kind of hard to see the dress in the picture you have posted. Do you have any more pictures of you in it? I have sent a picture of the dress on a hanger. One picture close up for detail and one to see the full dress. I asked for pictures with it on. I'll just look at that tomorrow. I never responded back. It was very alarming to have someone talk to me like that. Why would somebody want to see the dress on? I mean, I guess I understand, but really? 2 days later, I got a weird phone call at 7:05 a.m. By the way, this was my off day and I usually keep my ringer on because I'm always on call. To see that it wasn't work and an unknown caller, I was pretty mad, so I let it ring. They call again right after. I sighed and cleared my throat to answer. Hello. A raspy, gargled man's voice answered back to me. Yes, hello. Are you the one selling the dress? I am, yeah. I'm calling for my wife. I have some questions. In my head, I'm like, question marks, but I go with it. My name is Mark. And yours? I gave him my name, but he failed many times and almost made me think, dude, am I being prank called? It was pretty frustrating because I told him and spelled my name about 20 times. We get over introductions and he goes to the questioning. Is this a thick dress? Yeah, it is. Can this be worn as a fancy dinner dress? Sure, you can dress it casually or dressed up. Okay, how tall are you? 5'3". Okay, so my wife's pretty short and around your height. Do you wear a bra with that dress? She can wear it with or without. Mark continues to push. If I've ever worn a bra with the dress, I get short with my answers. Where are you right now? I feel like I've woken you up. I decided to lie to cover myself. Yeah, I'm at a friend's currently. Girlfriend's? A friend. I'm just not home, okay? But did you sleep in the same bed as her? Can we move on? I'm not home right now. His phone cut out and he calls back a minute later. Sorry, my phone died. So anyways, what cup size are you? Excuse me? I don't feel comfortable answering this. B or C? I'm not answering this. You look very big-breasted, very gifted. My wife has an ass. Do you? I don't want to answer this. You're making me feel uncomfortable, so I'm going to hang up. But does this dress ride up your back? When you walk, does it show your ass? I hung up. He decided to call me over and over, and it's not like I can block his number because his number was unknown. By the 20th call, I answered to tell him off. Listen, I don't feel like... and he cut me off. "You know, I know where you live. I want that dress." I hung up and cried. I didn't know what to do. I would understand if a guy wants a dress for his own pleasure, sexual or not, but at least tell me and not act like his wife needs one. Or does he have a wife? Why couldn't she call me herself? I don't know, I have so many questions. I'm legit scared and this number won't stop calling me. I even got an email that's not related to this about a guy named Mr. Anonymous asking me for smelly old flats. Is this normal for Craigslist? I used the app for some time and found it useful. It's better than Facebook Marketplace and has more reliable buyers. One mistake I believe I made was by having my real name and picture on my profile. At the time, I had a very cheap Android phone that I strictly used for a texting and calling app, as times were tough and it was difficult making my phone bill payment. Because of this, the app was on a separate device, a tablet, that I commonly would forget to check. I logged into my device a day after deciding to sell my old Wii. On there was a group of messages from a man getting increasingly more aggressive by the minute. As I hadn't responded the previous day, he thought I had ignored him. Messages threatening to either assault me or to get me assaulted by one of his female friends. Messages telling me how I was a stupid cunt and to watch my back from now on. It seemed a bit like overkill as it was just one day and a cheap old Wii. It was one day before I responded, but the messages were a bit too much. Even by the time I saw his messages, he had given me a review saying that I was a racist jerk against Mexicans. I blocked the user and kept my item up for sale. What was confusing to me was why he called me a racist and that he wasn't Hispanic at all. I could be wrong, but he had a profile picture which appeared to be a white male. He also sent his address in the previous messages, before I had a chance to respond, so I used this information to look up the individual on Facebook. Sure enough, there he is. A young white male, just a town over. Within the same day, another man had messaged asking to purchase the Wii. This time asking my address and offering his address in the case I was able to deliver. Completely different name, no picture, but the exact same address as the previous individual. Again, I immediately blocked it. He attempted 2 more times after that, once requesting the size of my jeans I had for sale, explaining he needed to know for when he'd come in them. After this, I deleted the app and haven't used it since. I still think about what would have happened if I were able to respond immediately. I didn't have a license and would allow others to pick up items straight from my home. I'm unsure if this is the right place to post this, but it was a close call with a stranger I never want to see again. This is something that I didn't realize the severity of until I was older. My mama had left me and my brother home alone. It was midday. My brother was 12, maybe 13, so I was 9. Watching him play Xbox in our living room. He had his headset on talking to his friends. There was a knock from the door in our carport. I run and answer the door without looking. It's a grown man I've never seen before. We were separated by the screen door, which at the time was unlocked. He asked me, "Are your parents home?" Horror washes over me. First of all, he's knocking from the carport, which is strange in of itself. A stranger would knock on the front door usually. And our carport is empty. We only had one car and my mother had taken it. This man knows that my parents aren't home. I'm afraid and I don't know why, but I am absolutely terrified. Immediately my brother in the other room comes to mind. I've never had a father figure. My brother has always been the one who has made me feel safe. The strongest person in the whole world. Somebody who could protect me in any situation. How most people would regard their father, I think. I feel as though I can barely speak. Wide-eyed. I managed to stutter out, "No, but my big brother's here." Without even a moment's pause, this man reaches for the screen door and starts to open it. Suddenly an arm reaches out from behind me over my shoulder and grabs the door. My brother pushes me holding the door, forcing the man back with his presence, out in the carport, and closes the door behind him. The man tells my brother he was looking to buy some shitty old swing set that was in our front yard at the time. My brother comes back in without saying anything to me, puts on his headset and continues playing. I sit down as well and continue watching him. I don't believe we ever told our mom. Luckily, I never encountered this person again, and it's pretty much fades away from my memory. But as I got older, it became one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. Creepy not so much because of what happened, but because of what could have. Unnerving how absolutely oblivious we were. I like to think the man was planning to lock me in a room, rob the place and leave, but people can be so evil.